The humiliation burned hotter than the chill of dawn in Santa Monica. Sarah Miller, barely 20, pressed the damp cloth to her chest as laughter echoed through the halls of the Pacific Arts Institute. Her green eyes, usually bright like emeralds in the light, were now clouded with tears she refused to shed. "Look, Cinderella wants to be a ballerina!" yelled Tiffany Reynolds, the Institute's prima ballerina, pointing at Sarah's cleaning uniform. "Do you actually think cleaning mirrors will teach you to dance?" Tiffany was 24, the daughter of a wealthy Malibuan family, with platinum blonde hair always pulled back in a perfect bun and long legs she inherited from her mother, who had also been a dancer. Her beauty was undeniable, but there was a coldness in her light blue eyes, a cruelty born from years of privilege and the certainty that the world belonged to her. The other dancers laughed cruelly, their immaculate tutus contrasting with Sarah's stained apron. There was Brittany Davis, 22, dark-haired and petite, with brown eyes that gleamed with malice, and Jessica Torres, 25, the tallest of the group, with black hair pulled back in a braid and a smile that promised trouble. All came from families who could afford the most expensive tuition fees in America, but none of them knew the truth, that this fair-skinned, light brown-haired young woman with her hair in a simple ponytail had once been the brightest star of the Imperial Ballet Academy. Sarah had won 3 consecutive national competitions, had been invited to auditions in Paris and London, and critics had called her the future of American ballet. She remembered perfectly the day everything changed. She was 18 and had just been accepted into the Art National Ballet's youth company. Her family had organized a small party in their humble home in Long Beach, a city outside of Los Angeles. Her father, John Miller, a 48-year-old mechanic with calloused hands but a heart of gold, had cried. With pride, her mother Grace had cooked mac and cheese all night, and Sam, her 16-year-old younger brother, had recorded a congratulatory video that she still kept on her phone and watched every night before bed. Now, with the halls empty and the echo of her footsteps resounding on the marble, Sarah headed to the main studio for her last task of the day. She had started working at the Institute 6 months ago, after Sam's death, and the medical expenses had left her family in ruin. Her father had to sell his auto shop, her mother had fallen ill with depression, and Sarah had taken any job she could find. Her trembling hands opened the double doors, revealing the space where her dreams had been born and died. The main studio was majestic, 13-foot ceilings, imported Russian hardwood floors, mirrors covering 3 entire walls, and ballet bars made of oak wood. The crystal chandeliers hung like frozen tears, reflecting the golden light of the sunset entering through the large windows. The mirrors reflected her multiplied, a hard-working young woman, rebellious hair escaping from her ponytail, tired eyes, but still burning. Her work shoes squeaked against the perfect floor as she approached the center of the studio. She dropped the rag and, without thinking, extended her arms. The silence was absolute, but Sarah heard the music in her soul. It was Chopin, the Nocturne in E-flat major, the same piece she had danced in her last performance before the tragedy. Her bare feet found the positions her body remembered like breathing. First position, port de bras, élevé. Each movement was a silent plea, a conversation with the pain she carried within. Her muscles, though out of practice, responded as if they had never stopped. The flexibility was still there, the natural grace she had inherited from her grandmother Eleanor, who had been a folk dancer in her youth. Her arms rose like swans taking flight, her back arched in perfect cambre, and her legs executed grand battlements that cut the air with millimeter precision. She danced for no one, she danced for everyone. She danced for Sam, who used to sit in the front row at all her rehearsals and clap until his hands hurt. She danced for her father, who worked double shifts to pay for her classes. She danced for her mother, who kept every program from every performance in a special box. Her legs rose in perfect grand battlements, her torso curved in cambre that seemed to weep, her arms told stories that words could not express. For a moment, the 2 years of pain vanished. She was not the humiliated cleaning lady. She was Sarah Miller, the dancer who had once made an entire theatre cry with her interpretation of The Dying Swan. She was the young woman who had dreamed of dancing at Carnegie Hall, who had practiced until her feet bled, who had believed that ballet could change the world. She finished in a position that had been her signature, a perfect arabesque with arms, extended towards the sky, as if to touch the stars. Her breathing was agitated, her body trembled slightly from the effort, but in her green eyes there was something that hadn't been there in months. Life. But dreams, like dances, must end. From the shadows of the upper balcony, intense blue eyes observed every movement. David Anderson, 30, had come to the Institute to review the latest reports for his foundation, but he had been paralyzed by the scene. Tall, with an athletic build that still showed the years as a star. American football player with perfectly combed black hair and a well-kept beard that framed his masculine face, David had seen art in the largest stadiums in the world. At 30, David was a man who had had it all: international fame as a quarterback for the New England Patriots, and later the Dallas Cowboys, millions of fans, endorsement deals, and business success that had multiplied his fortune after retirement. He was 6 feet 1 inch tall, had steel blue, eyes that had graced magazine covers, and a presence that dominated any room. But he had never witnessed something so pure, so heartbreaking, so beautiful as that young woman dancing in solitude. He had come to the Institute that afternoon because the financial numbers didn't add up. His foundation invested monthly in the Institute, but something in Brenda Rodriguez's reports didn't convince him. As a successful businessman, he had learned to trust his instincts, and something told him there were irregularities to investigate. But now, seeing that unknown young woman dance as if her life depended on it, all the numbers and reports had become irrelevant. There was something in her movements that transcended perfect technique. It was pure passion, pain transformed into beauty, a soul speaking through the body. When Sarah finished, panting and with tears finally running down her cheeks, the silence was absolute. She stood motionless for a moment, as if she wanted to preserve the magic. For another second, then reality returned like a slap. She picked up her rag, smoothed her apron, and left the studio without knowing she had been seen. David descended the stairs slowly, his heart beating in a way he hadn't remembered since his glory days on the field. In the center of the studio, where moments before he had witnessed magic, only the echo of something extraordinary remained. He approached the exact spot where she had danced, as if he could capture some of that energy that had filled the space. His phone vibrated. It was a message from his assistant, reminding him of his dinner with Japanese investors. But for the first time in years, David ignored a business obligation. He stayed in the studio until darkness completely filled it, thinking of green eyes and movements that spoke of broken dreams. That night, in his penthouse with panoramic views of the city, David couldn't sleep. He poured himself a bourbon cheese cabrun, stood in front of the window overlooking the St. Louis Angeles lights, and for the first time in 3 years wondered what he had been doing with his life. He had success, money, recognition, but when was the last time he had felt something as intense as what he had experienced watching that young woman dance? He dialed Brenda Rodriguez, the Institute's artistic director. "Brenda, I need information about an employee. A young woman, brown hair, green eyes." "Sarah Miller?" Brenda's voice immediately hardened, and David noticed something strange in her tone. "David, that girl is just cleaning staff. I want you to get me her file. Everything. Background, references, work history." There was a long pause, and David could hear the calculation in Brenda's silence. "As you wish, but I warn you that girl causes trouble. Her past is not clean." "What kind of trouble?" "We'd better talk tomorrow in person. There are things not discussed over the phone." When he hung up, David went to the window again. Somewhere in the city in some humble home. A young woman with green eyes carried the most beautiful dance he had ever seen in her soul, and he was determined to find out who Sarah Miller really was, no matter what dark secrets she might be hiding. But if you think you've seen it all, wait for the next part. Have you ever felt invisible until someone truly saw you? Like this video if you want to know what happens when these two worlds meet. 3 days later, Sarah arrived at the Institute at 5 a.m. as always. The building slept in dim light, only illuminated by emergency lights that created dancing shadows in the hallways. She preferred these moments of solitude when she could move without the scornful glances and hurtful comments. Her morning routine had begun at 4:30 a.m. in her small house in Long Beach. She had gotten up quietly so as not to wake her mother, had prepared coffee in the kitchen they shared with the family who rented them 2 rooms, and had taken 2 buses to get to the Institute. The trip took her an hour and a half, time she used to study online for a technical degree in administration that she hoped to finish someday. Her life had changed drastically in the last 2 years. Before, when she was the Imperial Academy's star, she had a used car her father had bought with sacrifice. They lived in their own modest house, and she focused solely on perfecting her technique. Now, every dollar counted. Her cleaning staff salary was barely enough for her mother's medication and basic household expenses. Grace Miller had developed severe depression after Sam's death. There were days she wouldn't get out of bed, days Sarah had to feed her like a child, days she just cried for hours holding a photograph of her youngest son. Social Security doctors had prescribed antidepressants, but the private psychological treatment she really needed was out of reach. But this morning would be different. Sarah Miller, the deep voice, startled her. She turned around and there he was, David Anderson, dressed in a perfectly tailored grey suit that enhanced his imposing figure. His blue eyes studied her with an intensity that made her feel naked. Even at 5 a.m. he looked impeccable, hair slicked back, perfectly trimmed beard, white shirt without a single wrinkle. It was clear he was coming from a social or business event from the night before. "Mr. Anderson," she murmured, lowering her gaze, "I didn't know you came this early. I saw you dance 3 nights ago." The words fell like stones into still water. Sarah felt the floor move beneath her feet. Her secret, her most vulnerable moment, had been discovered. For 2 years, she had been careful never to give in to the temptation of dancing in public, to keep that part of her soul hidden so as not to suffer more humiliation. "I don't know what you're talking about," she lied, clutching the cleaning supplies to her chest. David approached slowly, his footsteps echoing on the marble. She could smell his expensive cologne, a mix of bergamot and cedar that probably cost more than her monthly salary. It was extraordinary. "You have ballet in your soul, don't you?" Sarah's green eyes filled with tears. She had held them back for so long that now they threatened to overflow. "Not anymore, that was before." Before what? Silence stretched between them like an abyss. Sarah took a deep breath, fighting the urge to run away. She had learned not to trust rich people, their empty promises and acts of charity that disappeared when things got complicated. "Before everything was destroyed," she whispered finally. "Before my family lost everything because of my dreams. Before my younger brother Sam died in that accident while going to see me perform." The confession came out like a torrent that had been held back for too long. David saw how this strong young woman broke down before him, her shoulders trembling with the guilt she had carried for 2 years. "Sam was 16, Sarah continued, her voice broken. "He was the smartest in the family, got straight A's in high school, wanted to study engineering. But that night he was on his motorcycle on his way to my performance at the Imperial Academy when a car hit him. He died in the hospital 3 days later, calling my name. The image haunted her every night. Sam, in that hospital bed, tubes connected all over his body, opening his eyes just enough to whisper Sarah before the machine started beeping. The doctors had said there was a lot of brain damage, that he wasn't conscious, but she knew he had recognized her in those last moments. My father blamed himself for buying him that used motorcycle. He said that if he'd had money for a safe car, Sam would be alive. He couldn't bear the guilt and started drinking. We lost his job, we lost our house, and my mother broke down. David felt a pang in his chest. He knew that guilt, that crushing responsibility for tragedies beyond our control. In his own experience, he had learned that what-if scenarios could destroy a person more effectively than any enemy. "It wasn't your fault," he said softly. "How can you know that?" Her green eyes looked at him with pain and defiance. "You don't know me. You don't know what I am. You don't know that before the accident I was selfish, obsessed only with my career. You don't know that I argued with Sam that afternoon because he wanted us to go out for burgers together, and I had to rehearse." Tears were now running. Freely. The last words I said to him were, "Leave me alone. I have more important things to do." And the last words he said to me were, "It's okay, but I'll be in the front row applauding you as always. I know what I saw. I know that when you dance, the world stops." Sarah wiped her tears with the back of her hand, leaving smudges on her cleaning apron. "That doesn't matter anymore. Now I work to support my mother, who was widowed and sick after Sam's death. My father died 6 months later, from cirrhosis. This is my reality." David studied her face, the determination mixed with pain, the beauty that transcends circumstances, the strength that refuses to be completely broken. He had known many beautiful women in his life, models, actresses, heiresses, but none had that devastating authenticity that Sarah radiated. "What if I told you you could have both?" "What?" "Your job here is secure, but I want you to train with me. Early mornings, before the staff arrives. Just the two of us." Sarah looked at him as if he had lost his mind. The proposal was so surreal that for a moment she thought she was dreaming. "You are David Anderson, owner of this place, football legend, millionaire. Why would you want to train with the cleaning lady?" "Because I saw what no one else sees, because I recognize true talent when I find it." He moved closer, and Sarah could perceive his subtle masculine cologne and the warmth radiating from his body. "And because I think we both need this, both of us." For the first time, David dropped his mask of control. His blue eyes softened, showing a vulnerability he rarely revealed. 3 years ago, I left a footballer's at the peak of my career. Since then, I've built a business empire, multiplied my fortune, gained recognition as a philanthropist, but I haven't felt passion for anything until I saw you dance." David recalled his last years as a professional football player, the packed stadium shouting his name, the adrenaline, of scoring decisive goals, the feeling of being completely alive during the 90 minutes of a game. After retirement, he had tried to fill that void with business, with financial success, with charitable causes. But nothing had awakened in him that same intensity, that same passion he had felt watching Sarah dance. Sarah's heart was beating so fast she was sure he could hear it. The proposal was impossible, dangerous, tempting. What could a man like him truly want from someone like her? And what will people say? Brenda Rodriguez, the other dancers? They don't have to know, at least not yet. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling hope and fear battling in her chest. Sam appeared in her mind, smiling as he did when he was little, and she taught him pirouettes in their humble backyard. What would he tell her if he were here, to take the opportunity or to be cautious? "If I accept," she said slowly, "I need you to understand something. I cannot afford to lose everything again. I cannot hurt more people I love. My mother depends on me, and if this goes wrong, I won't hurt you, Sarah." The way he pronounced her name with that deep, careful voice stirred something within her, something she had believed dead with Sam. "Okay," she whispered, "but only training, nothing more." David smiled, and it was as if the sun had risen in the middle of dawn. It was a genuine smile, not the calculated smile he used in business meetings or social events. Nothing more, but they both knew it. It was a beautiful lie, Because when two broken souls recognize each other, when dance finds its music and silence finds its voice, nothing more becomes everything. Because I recognize true talent when I find it. He moved closer, and Sarah could perceive his subtle masculine cologne. And because I think we both need this. Both of us. For the first time, David dropped his mask of control. 3 years ago, I left football. Since then, I haven't felt passion for anything until I saw you dance. Sarah's heart was beating so fast she was sure he could hear it. The proposal was impossible, dangerous, tempting. And what will people say? Brenda Rodriguez? The other dancers? They don't have to know, at least not yet. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling hope and fear battling in her chest. Sam appeared in her mind, smiling as he did when he was little, and she taught him pirouettes in their humble backyard. "If I accept," she said slowly, "I need you to understand something. I cannot afford to lose everything again. I cannot hurt more people I love." "I won't hurt you, Sarah." The way he pronounced her name, with that deep, careful voice, stirred something within her, something she had believed dead with Sam. "Okay," she whispered, "but only training. Nothing more." David smiled, and it was as if the sun had risen in the middle of dawn. Nothing more. But they both knew it was a beautiful lie. Because when two broken souls recognize each other, when dance finds its music, and silence finds its voice, nothing more becomes everything. And just when she started to trust, the past returned unannounced. As she left the institute that morning, Sarah didn't see the figure who had been watching them from the shadows. Brenda Rodriguez clutched her cell phone, her eyes shining with a mix of jealousy and determination. Brenda had arrived early that morning because she had forgotten important documents in her office. The last thing she expected was to find David Anderson in an intimate conversation with the cleaning lady. She had been hiding behind a column, listening to every word, every confession, every promise. At 45, Brenda had dedicated her entire life to ballet. She had been a successful dancer in her youth, had traveled through Europe with reputable companies, had sacrificed love and motherhood for her art. When a knee injury ended her performing career, she had reinvented herself as an artistic director, first in small theaters and finally at the prestigious Pacific Arts Institute. But she had always harbored secret hopes for David. Since he had created the foundation that financed the institute, she had carefully cultivated her relationship with him. Work dinners that stretched too long, invitations to cultural galas, conversations about art that sometimes drifted into more personal topics. Nothing had ever happened, but Brenda had felt a connection, a possibility. Seeing David looking at that young woman with an intensity he had never shown towards her filled her with cold, calculating rage. How dared that cleaning employee seduce a man of David's caliber? And how dared he fall into the clutches of someone so inferior? One call. That's all it took to destroy what had just begun. She dialed a number she had saved for 2 years, a number she had sworn never to use unless absolutely necessary. "Detective Miller? It's Brenda Rodriguez." "Yes, about the Miller case. I think I have some new information you'll be interested in." The next morning, Sarah arrived at the institute with a knot in her stomach. She had spent the entire night debating with herself between the reason that screamed at her to flee and the heart that whispered that perhaps, just perhaps, she deserved a second chance. On the bus to the institute, she had observed her reflection in the window. At 20, she still retained the natural elegance she had inherited from her grandmother Eleanor, but 2 years of physical work and worries had left their mark. Her hands, once soft and cared for ballet, now had calluses and small scars from cleaning products. Her light brown hair had lost the shine it had when she could afford salon treatments, and her fair skin showed the fatigue of workdays that began before dawn. But her green eyes retained that intensity that had distinguished her as a dancer, that ability to express deep emotions without saying a word. It was the only thing that time and difficulties had not been able to take from her. Upon Arriving, she had changed from her cleaning uniform into athletic clothes she had found at the bottom of her closet, worn black leggings from her academy days, and a white cotton t-shirt. She didn't have new ballet shoes, but she had kept an old pair that, although worn, still fit. David was already there, but he had changed from his suit into athletic wear, a black t-shirt that highlighted his athletic torso and exercise pants. Without the armor of the successful businessman, he looked more human, more approachable. His muscles still showed years of intensive professional football training, and Sarah couldn't help but notice the way he moved, with the natural grace of an elite athlete. "I thought you wouldn't come," he admitted when he saw her enter. "I thought so too." They looked at each other in silence, two strangers about to share something intimate and vulnerable. The main studio awaited them, with its infinite mirrors and wooden floor that had witnessed thousands of dreams. The early morning light entered softly through the large windows, creating an almost magical atmosphere. "I haven't formally trained in 2 years," Sarah confessed, taking off her shoes and standing barefoot. Her feet, which had once been perfect for ballet, now showed the marks of work, some calluses, nails, without the professional care they once received. "I've never trained ballet," David replied with a smile that completely transformed his face. The calculating businessman's smile vanished, replaced by something genuine and almost childlike. "I guess we're even." Sarah couldn't help but smile too. It was strange, that ease with which this man broke down her defenses, the way his presence made her feel safe instead of intimidated. "Let's start with something basic," she said, heading to the center of the studio. "First position, simple port de bras." David followed her, placing himself beside her in front of the mirror. Seeing them together was a beautiful contrast. She, delicate yet strong, with her hair pulled back in a high bun that showed her elegant neck. He, imposing and masculine, but willing to be vulnerable. Feet in first position, like this. Sarah adjusted David's posture, and when her hands touched his shoulders, she felt an electric current. His muscles were firm under her fingers, and she could perceive the tension he carried in his body, years of pressure and responsibilities that had crystallized into muscle knots. Now the arms, soft, as if holding something very fragile. David followed her instructions, surprisingly graceful for someone of his height. His athlete's body had a natural coordination that facilitated learning, although ballet movements required a delicacy very different from the explosive force of football. Like this? Perfect. Their voices had become whispers in the intimacy of the empty studio. They practiced for an hour. David was a dedicated student, observing Sarah's every movement as if it were the most important thing in the world, and perhaps it was. There was a concentration in his blue eyes that Sarah had seen before in professional dancers, that ability to completely absorb a lesson. For David, watching Sarah teach was discovering a completely new facet of her personality. The shy and insecure young woman transformed when she talked about ballet. Her eyes lit up, her posture straightened, and every explanation was accompanied by demonstrations that were small works of art in themselves. "Why ballet?" he asked during a break, both sitting on the floor with water bottles. Sarah looked up at the ceiling, searching for words. "Because when I was a kid in our humble neighborhood in Long Beach, because we didn't have much, my dad was a mechanic and earned barely enough to pay the rent and buy groceries. My mom worked cleaning houses in Ica, Malibu, and there were days we didn't even have money for the bus." Her eyes lit up with the memory. "But on Saturdays, my grandmother Eleanor, who had been a folk dancer in her youth, would take Sam and me downtown to see the free folk dance performances in Central Park. She used to say that beauty was priceless, that we all deserved a little magic." David listened to her with an attention that made her feel valued, as if every word was important. "One day, after a performance, one of the dancers approached me. Her name was Miss Evans, and she was the director of the ballet school at the Cultural Institute. She said I had natural lines, that if my parents took me to classes, I could go far." Sarah smiled nostalgically. "My dad, who barely knew how to read and write but understood dreams, worked double shifts for months to pay for my academy. He got up at 5 in the morning and came home after 10 at night, with hands black with grease and an exhausted body, but he never complained. And Sam was my biggest fan. He was 3 years younger than me, but he came to all my rehearsals when he could. He knew all my choreographies by heart, and when I was discouraged by some criticism from the teachers, he would tell me I was the best dancer in the world. The smile slowly faded. He said that when I was famous, he would be my manager. He had made plans to study business administration so he could manage my career. He had everything calculated, how much it would cost to put on a show, which theaters were best, how we could help our family. Instead, I was the one who killed him. Sarah. No, she interrupted him, standing up with a movement that was still elegant despite the pain. Don't say it wasn't my fault. If I hadn't been so ambitious, so selfish with my dreams, he would be alive studying engineering like he wanted. David stood up too, approaching slowly. He could see the way the pain had settled in her body, in the tension of her shoulders, in the way she avoided his gaze. Can I tell you something? She nodded, not trusting her voice. In my last professional game on May 15, 2022, I scored the goal that won us the Super Bowl. It was the most glorious moment of my sports career. The entire stadium chanted my name, my teammates carried me on their shoulders, and I knew I had ended my career at the top. David looked towards the mirrors, but Sarah knew he was seeing something very different. But while I was celebrating on the field, my father suffered a massive heart attack in the stands. The emotion, the adrenaline of the goal, the joy, it was all too much for his 65-year-old heart that was already sick. He died in the hospital that same night, while I was still wearing my championship jersey. Sarah looked at him, surprised by the confession. She had never read that information in the news. She had never heard that the death of David's father was related to his last game. For years, I wondered if he would have survived if I hadn't played that day, if I hadn't excited him so much, if I hadn't scored that goal. I left football sat at the top, because I couldn't bear the guilt that my greatest triumph had caused his death. And now I believe we honor those we lost by moving forward, not by stopping. His blue eyes looked at her with an intensity that disarmed her. Sam would be proud to see you dance again, and my father would be proud to see me find a new passion. Tears ran down Sarah's cheeks before she could stop them. David slowly raised his hand, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. When she didn't, he wiped her tears with his thumb, a gesture so tender it broke her heart and healed it at the same time. "I can't hurt anyone else," she whispered. "You're not going to hurt anyone. How can you be so sure?" "Because I know you." "No, you don't know me. I know your soul when you dance. I know your strength when you cry, but don't give up. I know your heart when you talk about Sam with so much love that it hurts." His voice became softer. "And I know you are the bravest woman I have ever met." The air between them became thick. Sarah felt the world shrink to David's blue eyes, to the warmth of his hand still on her cheek, to the sound of their ragged breaths. She could smell his cologne mixed with the clean sweat of exercise. She could see the small beads of perspiration on his forehead that made him seem more human. "David, say it," he asked, moving closer. "Tell me you feel it too." "I can't." "Why?" "Because you are David Anderson, and I am nobody. You are everything." The words hung in the air like a promise. David moved closer until he could count every lash of her green eyes, until he could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. Sarah could see the small lines around his eyes, the almost invisible scar on his chin from some football game, the way his lips parted slightly. The moment stretched like the slow movement of a ballet, full of possibilities and unspoken promises. The sound of opening doors separated them like lightning. Brenda Rodriguez entered the studio with a determined stride, accompanied by 2 men in dark suits whom Sarah didn't recognize, but who had the unmistakable air of officials or investigators. "David, we need to talk." Now! Brenda's eyes moved between David and Sarah with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, especially about Ms. Miller and certain irregularities in her past. Sarah felt the floor open beneath her. The perfect world she had built in that hour of training collapsed in seconds. David instinctively stepped in front of her, protective, but she could see the confusion in his eyes. "What are you talking about, Brenda? About a scandal that could destroy your foundation's reputation? About $50,000 that disappeared from the Imperial Academy's scholarship account just before you left?" Sarah's heart pounded. $50,000, $50,000 USD, was a fortune to her. "I didn't steal anything," Sarah said, her voice trembling but firm. "How curious. The money disappeared the same day your brother had the accident, the same day your family suddenly could afford all the medical expenses for the private hospital where he was admitted." David felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. The numbers didn't lie, and Brenda knew it. The investigation was closed because the Academy director, Ms. Evelyn White, had too soft a heart, Brenda continued, circling Sarah like a predator. "But I kept all the documents, all the proof." One of the men in suits opened a folder and handed several papers to David. Bank statements, transfers, dates that perfectly matched the timeline Brenda had presented. "Explain it to me," David said, his voice strangely calm. "Explain why you didn't tell me this." Sarah looked at him, watching the trust they had built crumble before her eyes. "Because I knew you would think exactly what you're thinking now." "And what am I thinking?" "That I'm a thief, that I took advantage of a tragedy to steal money that didn't belong to me." Silence stretched between them like an abyss. David studied the papers, his businessman's mind analyzing every detail, every number, every date. "Did you?" he finally asked. The question fell like a slap. Sarah felt something irreparably break inside her chest. "If you need to ask, then you already have your answer." She turned to leave, but David stopped her by the arm. "Answer the question." Sarah turned around, and he saw in her green eyes a pain so deep that for a moment he doubted everything he had just heard. "My brother was dying," Sarah said, her voice broken but full of dignity. "The doctor said he needed an experimental surgery that cost exactly $50,000. $50,000 USD. My family didn't have that amount. We had nothing." "So you did take it?" "No." The word came out as a silent scream. "Evelyn White, the director, lent it to me from her own personal money. She told me to pay it back when I could, that my talent was more valuable than any amount. She put the money in the scholarship account temporarily to make it look official, and then transferred it to the hospital." "Do you have proof of that?" "Evelyn died of cancer 6 months after Sam's accident. She took the truth with her." Brenda smiled triumphantly. "How convenient. The only person who could corroborate your story is dead. But I have this." Sarah pulled a crumpled yellowed letter from her pocket. "The last letter Evelyn wrote to me before she died." With trembling hands, David took the letter and read, "My dearest Sarah, do not let the guilt over the decision we made together destroy your future. The money I lent you was not from the Academy. It was mine, inherited from my mother. Your brother deserved that chance at life, and you deserve to dance again. Someday, when you can, repay that amount to someone who needs it as much as you did. With love, Evelyn White." The silence that followed was deafening. David looked at the letter, then at the papers Brenda had presented, then at Sarah's distraught face. "Why didn't you show me this from the beginning?" "Because," Sarah fought back tears, "because even with this letter I look guilty. Because Evelyn is dead and cannot confirm her version. Because for 2 years I've been paying every dollar I can from my salary to the Academy's new scholarship account, trying to repay that debt, even though I don't legally have to." David felt the world move beneath his feet. The woman in front of him was not a thief. She was someone who had carried a guilt that didn't belong to her, who had sacrificed everything to save her brother, who had worked in silence to repair something she hadn't broken. "Sarah, no." She moved away, wrapping her arms around her body like a shield. "I know what you're going to say, that I'm complicated, that I bring trouble, that a relationship between us would be impossible. I was going to say, I believe you. The words stopped Sarah in her tracks. She turned slowly, her green eyes shining with unshed tears. What? I believe you. I believe every word you said. Brenda intervened, furious. David, you can't be so naive. This woman, David interrupted her, his voice sharp as steel, is the most honest person I've met. And you, Brenda, have just shown exactly why my foundation needs new artistic direction. Are you firing me? I'm releasing you from responsibilities you clearly cannot handle with the class this institution deserves. Brenda paled. This won't stand. I have contacts, influence, and I have something better. I have the truth. The men in suits followed Brenda to the exit, her veiled threats losing strength against David's determination. When they were alone, David slowly approached Sarah. Why didn't you trust me? Because, Sarah closed her eyes, because when you love someone, you're afraid of the moment they stop seeing you as something beautiful. Did you say you love me? Sarah's heart stopped. The words had come out without her being able to stop them. I didn't mean to say, because I love you. David cupped her face in his hands. I've loved you since the moment I saw you dance. I love you for your strength, for your pain, for the way you fight for the people you love, even when it costs you everything. David, I love you for working in silence, to pay a debt that wasn't yours. I love you for crying for your brother every day, but still going on for your mother. I love you because you are real in a world full of masks. Their lips met in a kiss that tasted of tears, of truth, of promises neither of them knew if they could keep. It was a kiss that spoke of shared pain and reborn hope, of two souls that had recognized each other in the darkness. When they parted, Sarah whispered against his lips, "Can you love someone who broke your soul?" The answer is one step away. But there was something else in David's eyes, something Sarah couldn't decipher. A secret he also kept, a truth that could change everything once again. Do you think true love can survive such a deep betrayal? What secret do you think David is keeping? 2 weeks after the confrontation with Brenda, Sarah and David had found a precious routine. Every morning they met in the studio where ballet mixed with intimate conversations, stolen kisses between pirouettes, and the slow but solid construction of something that resembled true love. Sarah had bloomed like a flower after the rain. Her green eyes shone with a light that had been extinguished for years. Her fair skin seemed illuminated from within, and when she danced, it was impossible not to believe in magic. David, for his part, had discovered that protecting Sarah's dreams filled him with a satisfaction that neither trophies nor business success had ever given him. Seeing her regain her confidence, seeing her smile unreservedly, seeing her dance as if it were the first time, that was his new addiction. But that morning, when Sarah arrived at the studio, she found David sitting on the floor, his back against the mirror, and an expression she had never seen before. He had a folder in his hands and looked at her as if he had just seen a ghost. "What's wrong?" Sarah asked, approaching slowly. "I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you from the beginning." Sarah's heart began to beat faster. After all they had been through, after sharing their darkest secrets, what could be so terrible? "Tell me." David took a deep breath, like a man about to jump into the void. "Sam's accident, I was there." The words fell like bombs in the silence of the studio. Sarah felt the floor move beneath her feet. "What?" "The car that hit your brother. It was mine." The world stopped. Sarah looked at him, not understanding, her mind refusing to process the information. "No," she whispered. "No, that's not possible. My driver, Robert, was picking me up after a meeting. It was night, it was raining, and Sam was going. Too fast on his motorcycle. Robert didn't see him until it was too late." Sarah backed away from him, as if he burned her. "No, no, no, no. I was the one who paid all the medical expenses for the hospital. I was the one who made sure your family had everything they needed. I paid through third parties, so they would never know it came from me. You, Sarah's voice broke. You killed my brother. Sarah, please, don't touch me, she yelled when he tried to approach. Don't you dare touch me. Tears ran down her face like rivers of pain. Everything made sense in the cruelest way possible. Why David had appeared in her life, why he had taken an interest in her, why he had been so generous, so protective. All this time, has it been guilt? Pity? No, listen to me. Is that why you saw me dance and decided to save me, to feel better about yourself? David stood up, desperate. At first, yes. At first I thought maybe by helping you I could find some peace. But then I met you, Sarah. I truly met you. You met me. Her laugh sounded broken, bitter. Or did you meet your charity project, the sister of the boy your driver killed? You fell in love with your own guilt, not with me. The accusation hit him like a punch. David felt like he was drowning in the truth of his own confused motivations. It's not true. No? Then tell me, David. When were you going to tell me? After the wedding? After it was too late for me to leave? I was going to tell. You... When? We've been together for weeks. I told you I loved you, and all this time you knew you were responsible for Sam's death. Sarah approached him, her green eyes burning with a fury he had never seen. You know what's the worst part? You made me feel guilty. For 2 years I blamed myself for his death, and you let me carry that guilt while you knew the truth. I never wanted you to... To what? To feel responsible for my brother's death? To live with that burden? Well, I did. Every single day. David held out his hands to her, pleading. Sarah, what I feel for you is real, more real than anything I've ever felt in my life. How can I believe you? How can I believe a single word that comes out of your mouth? Because you know me, because you've seen who I am when I'm with you. What I've seen is a liar. She turned towards the exit but stopped at the door. And the most pathetic thing is that for a moment I actually believed someone like you could love me for who I am. I love you for who you are. You love me for who you killed. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Sarah left the studio, leaving David alone with the echo of his own destruction. In the hallway, Sarah collapsed against the wall, sobbing with a desperation that tore pieces from her soul. Everything beautiful she had built in the last few weeks had turned to ashes. The love that had begun to heal her wounds had now opened them deeper than ever. David remained in the studio, looking at the folder containing all the accident reports, all the receipts for the anonymous payments he had made to Sam's family, all the evidence of a guilt he had carried for 2 years until it turned into something he believed was love. But was it just guilt? Or was there something more, something real and true beneath all the pain and lies? The question would haunt him during the darkest days to come. The secret had finally been revealed, and nothing would ever be the same. Can love survive such a deep betrayal? Do you think David truly loved Sarah, or was it just guilt disguised? 3 months passed like an eternity. Sarah had left her job at the institute and now cleaned offices at night, a job that allowed her to remain invisible, lost in the anonymity she desperately sought. Her mother, Grace Miller, a 52-year-old woman with grey hair, pulled back in a braid, and hands calloused from years of work, watched her daughter waste away day by day. Her daughter's green eyes had lost their shine, and she no longer talked about dancing, no longer hummed the melodies that once filled their small house in Tass, Long Beach. "Sweetheart," she said one night as Sarah got ready for work, "I don't know what happened with that man, but this isn't living." "I'm fine, Mom." "No, you're not fine. You're dying inside, and Sam wouldn't have wanted that for you." Her brother's name remained an open wound. Sarah stopped at the door, her shoulders trembling. "Sam is dead. Because of me, Mom. Because of my stupid dreams. Sam is dead because of an accident, and you're wasting the life he would have given anything to live." That same night, as Sarah cleaned offices in a corporate building downtown Los Angeles, she found an abandoned newspaper on one of the desks. In the business section, a photograph made her stop dead. It was David, but he looked terrible. He had lost weight. His beard was unkempt, and his blue eyes looked empty. The headline read, "Businessman David Anderson closes cultural foundation after personal scandal." Sarah read the article with a pounding heart. David had closed his foundation, sold most of his companies, and according to close sources, had become a recluse who barely left his house. It is rumored that Anderson is going through a deep personal crisis related to a car accident 2 years ago, the article said. The businessman, once known for his philanthropy and success, now avoids all public appearances. Sarah felt a strange pang in her chest. It was pain, but also something else. Concern, regret. The next day, she couldn't resist her curiosity. She took the bus to the residential area where David lived, telling herself she just wanted to see him from afar, to make sure he was okay. She found him in the small park in front of his building, sitting on a bench, feeding pigeons. Breadcrumbs. He looked like a defeated man, a shadow of the confident businessman she had known. Sarah approached. Slowly, her heart beating so fast she was sure he could hear it. "Hi," she said softly. David looked up, and when he saw her, the crumbs fell from his hands. He looked as if he had seen a miracle and a curse at the same time. "Sarah, you look terrible." A sad smile crossed his face. "You look beautiful, as always." She sat beside him on the bench, keeping a safe distance. Silence stretched between them, filled with everything they had lost. "I read about the foundation," she finally said. "I couldn't continue. Every time I went into that place, I saw you dancing. I saw you hating me. Why did you close everything?" David looked up at the sky, as if searching for answers he hadn't found in months of personal torture. "Because I realized you were right. Everything I felt, everything I thought was love, was tainted by guilt, and I couldn't live with that. And now I don't know what's real and what isn't. I don't know if I ever truly loved you, or if I was just trying to atone for my sins." Sarah studied him in silence. This broken man in front of her bore no resemblance to the David she had known. This was someone who had hit rock bottom, who had lost everything, including his own identity. "Do you want to know something?" she said softly. "During these 3 months I've thought a lot about Sam, about you, about us." David looked at her with a mixture of hope and terror. "Sam died because he rode too fast in the rain, excited to see me perform. You didn't, force him onto that motorcycle. Your driver didn't mean to hurt him. It was an accident. But if I hadn't been there, if your grandmother hadn't given birth to you, you wouldn't have been there either. If Sam hadn't been born, he wouldn't have been there either. If... Sarah turned to him. "Do you know how many ifs I've said in these 2 years?" David shook his head. "Millions. And they never brought my brother back." They fell silent again. A pigeon approached Sarah's feet, waiting for crumbs that wouldn't come. "You know what hurts the most?" Sarah asked. "It's not that you were responsible for the accident. It's that you didn't trust me enough to tell me. I was afraid of losing you. And you lost me anyway. Did I lose you?" Sarah didn't answer immediately. She got up from the bench and walked a few steps, hugging herself. "My mother told me something last night. She said Sam wouldn't have wanted me to waste my life suffering. She was right. She also said that true love isn't destroyed by the truth, it's strengthened by it." David slowly stood up. "What are you saying?" Sarah turned to him, and for the first time in months, there was something akin to hope in her green eyes. "I'm saying that maybe we've both been punishing ourselves for things we can't change. Maybe it's time to ask ourselves what Sam would have wanted for us. And what would he have wanted? For us to be happy, for us to live, for us to love without fear." David approached, slowly, like someone approaching a wounded animal. "Do you think we could try again? Start from scratch, without secrets, without guilt?" "Not from scratch," Sarah said, extending her hand to him. "From here, from everything we've lived through, everything we've lost, everything we've learned." When their hands touched, both felt something heal within their chests. It wasn't the end of pain, but it was the beginning of something new. "I love you," David whispered. "I love you for who you are. Not for who I lost. I love you because you make me want to be better, because your strength inspires me, because when you smile, the world make sense. "And I love you," Sarah replied, "because you saw me when I was invisible, because you believed in my dreams when I had stopped believing, because your love taught me that I deserved to be happy." They kissed under the lush Los Angeles sky, surrounded by pigeons, and bathed in a golden light that seemed like a blessing. It was a kiss that tasted of forgiveness, of second chances, of the promise that true love can survive even the most painful truths. 6 months later, Sarah Miller debuted as prima ballerina at the new Sam Miller Theatre, an intimate space financed by the Rebirth Foundation that David had created in honor of her brother. In the front row, David watched her dance with eyes full of tears of pride and love. In that night's program, there was a dedication for Sam, who taught us that true love never dies, it only transforms. For Grace, who showed us that hope never gives up, and for all who believe that happy endings are possible even after the darkest storm. When Sarah finished her solo, the entire theatre rose to its feet, but her eyes only sought David's, who waited for her at the foot of the stage with a ring in his hand and a question on his lips. "Will you dance with me for the rest of our lives?" "Yes," she replied, laughing and crying at the same time. "Forever." And as the audience applauded, Sarah felt a familiar presence beside her. In her heart, Sam smiled, finally at peace. This story isn't just about them. It can also be about you. 5 years later, the Sam Miller Theatre gleamed under the golden sunset lights of the Birch, Los Angeles. In its 5th season, it had become one of the most prestigious cultural spaces in America, known not only for the quality of its productions, but also for its commitment to artists from all walks of life. The glass and steel facade reflected the last rays of the sun, while inside, the red velvet seats slowly filled with an expectant audience. Sarah Anderson, it still brought her an intimate smile to hear her full name, prepared in her private dressing room for what would be the most important performance of her career. At 25, she had matured into a woman of serene beauty and quiet strength. Her green eyes retained that intensity that had characterized her since youth, but now they shone with a confidence that had taken years to build. Her hands, now well cared for and strong, adjusted the point shoes that had been a gift from David on their first wedding anniversary. They were point shoes from the world's most exclusive brand, but not for their price, rather because they had been specially made for her by the same artisan who had created the shoes for the Bolshoi's prima ballerinas. "Ready to make history?" asked a familiar voice from the doorway. Sarah turned to find her husband leaning against the frame, dressed in an elegant black suit that enhanced his still athletic figure. David had turned 35 last month, and although a few silver hairs adorned his temples, he was still the most handsome man she had ever seen. But more than his physical appearance, it was the way he looked at her, as if she were the greatest miracle of his life that made her fall in love every day. "Make history?" Sarah repeated, approaching him with that grace that now came naturally to her both on stage and in everyday life. The first Mexican-American principal dancer to perform Giselle in its entirety in her own theatre, with original choreography, before an audience that includes critics from the New York Times and Le Figaro. David took her hands, gently kissing her knuckles. "I'd say that counts as making history." Sarah smiled, recalling the path that had led them here. After that terrible day when Brenda had tried to destroy their relationship with lies and manipulation, they had spent months rebuilding trust, healing wounds that seemed impossible to mend. The truth about Sam's accident had been devastating, but also liberating. For the first time in years, both had been able to face their guilt and turn it into something constructive. The process hadn't been easy. They had attended couples therapy for a year, had had painful conversations that had made them cry to exhaustion, had doubted if love was enough to overcome so much pain. But every session, every tear, every moment of brutal honesty had brought them closer. David had sold most of his businesses to focus on the foundation that now bore both their names, the Sam Miller Anderson Foundation for the Arts. Its mission was simple but revolutionary: to democratize access to art, especially for talented young people from low-income backgrounds who lacked opportunities. "You know what's the most beautiful thing about all this?" Sarah said, adjusting David's tie with an intimate gesture she had perfected during their 3 years of marriage. "What?" "That Sam is going to be there." She pointed towards the theatre. "In the front row, seat 1A, just like we always dreamed." David followed her gaze to the seat they had kept empty at every performance, decorated with a small plaque that read, "Reserved for Sam Miller, our first fan." It wasn't a morbid sadness, but a celebration of memory that had learned to honor life instead of lamenting death. "He would be so proud," David murmured, wrapping his arms around Sarah. "He is," she corrected him. "I know, because this morning, when I was rehearsing the final sequence, I felt that feeling I used to get when he watched me practice, like someone was silently applauding." A soft knock on the door interrupted the intimate moment. "Sarah, it's time," said Brittany's voice, who ironically had become one of her best friends after Brenda was fired. The experience had taught Brittany, and all the dancers at the Institute, that true talent knows no social classes. "Nervous, David?" asked, noticing the slight tremor in Sarah's hands. "Terrified," she admitted with a laugh, "but in a good way. As Sam used to say, nerves are just excitement that doesn't know where to go." David kissed her gently, careful not to smudge her makeup. "I love you, Sarah Anderson. No matter what happens out there, you've already won. You've already triumphed." "I love you more," she whispered against his lips. The theatre was completely full. In the front row, besides the seat reserved for Sam, sat Grace Miller, now 57 and radiant with pride. The past 5 years had been a time of healing for her as well. The psychological therapy David had discreetly funded had helped her process the grief for Sam and for her husband. Now she worked as a coordinator for the foundation, helping other families going through similar tragedies. Beside her sat Eleanor Miller, Sarah's grandmother, 78, who had lived long enough to see her granddaughter triumph on the country's most important stages. Her eyes, though clouded by age, shone with tears of happiness. In the presidential box sat the governor of California and his wife, along with the French ambassador to the United States, who had come especially for this performance after Sarah's ballet had been reviewed in European media. But for Sarah, the most important audience was in the back rows. 100 children and young people from public schools in Los Angeles and its surroundings, special guests of the foundation. Many of them had never seen live ballet. Some had never been to a theatre. Their eyes shone with the same wonder Sarah had felt when her grandmother took her to see the free performances in the park. The lights went down. The murmur of the audience faded. In the absolute darkness, Sarah took a deep breath, feeling her body prepare to tell a story she knew by heart, but that felt new every night. Adolphe Adams' music filled the theatre, and when the lights came up, Sarah was in the center of the stage, completely transformed into Giselle. She was no longer the young cleaning lady who had danced in solitude out of emotional need. She was a complete artist, a woman who had found a way to turn her pain into beauty. For the next 90 minutes, Sarah told the story of love, betrayal, forgiveness, and redemption that was Giselle. But she also told her own story. Every grand jeté spoke of her leap towards love despite fear. Every pirouette represented the unpredictable turns her life had taken. Every arabesque was a search for balance between the past and the future. At the most emotional moment of the ballet, when Giselle forgives Albrecht despite his betrayal, Sarah looked towards the front row, and for a moment, for an impossible and beautiful moment, she seemed to see Sam, smiling, silently applauding, as he had promised he always would. When the curtain fell, the theatre erupted in applause that lasted 15 minutes. The audience rose as one, and Sarah could see tears on the faces of strangers who had been touched by her art. The international critics applauded enthusiastically, and she knew the reviews would be extraordinary. But the ovation that mattered most to her came from those 100 children in the back rows who applauded with the same intensity Sam had shown in every family rehearsal. The reception afterward was held in the theatre gardens, illuminated by thousands of lights that created a magical atmosphere. Sarah, now dressed in an elegant navy blue gown that David had personally chosen, moved among the guests with the grace of one who had learned to navigate any world. Miss Anderson, an elegant man with a French accent, approached. "I am Jean-Pierre Dubois, artistic director of the Paris Opera. We have been following your career, and I would like to invite you to audition for our next season." Sarah exchanged a look with David, who nodded proudly. "That would be an honor, Monsieur Dubois, but it would have to be under certain conditions, which, that part of my salary be allocated to scholarships for American students who want to study in Paris, and that I can return each season to perform here at the Sam Miller Theatre." The Frenchman smiled, clearly impressed. "I believe we can reach an agreement." As Dubois walked away, David wrapped his arm around Sarah's waist. "Paris, only if you come with me. Wherever you go," he said, and it wasn't a cliché but a promise he had kept for 5 years. Later that night, when the last guests had left and the theatre was silent, Sarah and David sat in the empty seats, contemplating the stage where magic had just happened. "You know what I was thinking during your performance?" David asked. "What?" "About that first morning when I saw you dance. I thought I was seeing a broken woman trying to find pieces of herself." Sarah snuggled against him. "And what do you see now?" "I see a woman who took those broken pieces and turned them into something more beautiful than they had ever been before." They fell silent, enjoying the intimacy of the moment. On stage, the service lights created long shadows that seemed to dance by themselves. "David," Sarah said softly, "there's something I need to tell you." "What?" Sarah took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "The doctor confirmed this morning. We're having a baby." David stood motionless for a moment, processing the words. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his face like the sunrise. "A baby, a baby." David kissed her with a tenderness that contained years of love, of hope, of fulfilled dreams and dreams yet to come. "It's a boy," Sarah whispered against his lips, "and I already know what he's going to be named. Sam. And in the silence of the theatre, surrounded by dancing shadows and the promise of new life, both felt a familiar presence, as if someone was blessing them from some beautiful place where dreams never die. The following year, when Sam Anderson Jr. turned 1 month old, his parents took him to the Sam Miller Theatre for his first show. It was a special performance for families, with lullabies played by the symphony orchestra and dancers who told stories of hope. Little Sam, with his mother's green eyes and his father's dark hair, slept peacefully throughout the performance, lulled by the same music that had healed his parents. In that night's program, there was a special dedication. For Sam Miller, who taught us that true love never dies, it only transforms. For Sam Anderson Jr., who teaches us that life always finds a way to continue, and for all who believe that every ending is also a beginning. And so, in a theatre named after a young man who had died too soon, but whose love had made a story of rebirth possible, the dance continued, because that is what true love does. It transforms pain into beauty, loss into hope, and turns every ending into the promise of a new beginning.